My name is Michael Riley. In late 1993 and early 1995, Anne Rice and I taped a series of talks that became the basis for a book entitled Conversations with Anne Rice. I'm a teacher and writer about film and literature, and Anne has been one of my closest friends for many years. My reasons for doing the book were simple: to let Anne speak for herself, to draw upon our long shared history, our countless conversations, to talk about things that I found interesting and thought her readers would too, in order to explore Anne's work, its relationship to her life, her convictions, her passions and her doubts, and above all, her fierce determination to pursue her own vision. Today we have come together again to talk as we have so many times before. This audiobook is not an attempt to replicate the conversations that make up the print book, but rather an outgrowth of them. In fact, sometimes it seems to me that every time Anne and I get together, we simply continue a single great long conversation that we began more than 30 years ago. What you will hear in this audiobook is unscripted and unrehearsed. In the truest sense, it will be Anne Rice speaking for herself.
Random House Audiobooks presents Interview with Anne Rice, a conversation between Anne Rice and Michael Riley.
And almost a year and a half have passed since we recorded the last of the talks for the book, Conversations with Anne Rice. Let me summarize some of the things that have happened since then that we're going to want to talk a bit about. In July 1995, about a year ago, you published the fifth of the Vampire Chronicles, Memnoch the Devil. Since then, you've written The Servant of the Bones, which will be published in August this summer, 1996. And only a few days ago, quite literally, your newest novel, Violin, which will come out a year from now in the summer of 97.
Yes, thank God.
And I want to talk more about that later, of course. Also, finally, long awaited, the film of Interview with the Vampire was released to a huge success worldwide, and you've written a screenplay for your own novel, The Witching Hour. So there's a lot of things to talk about. But I'd like to begin talking about Memnoch, which had not come out when we talked the last time.
Sure.
You told me when you finished Memnoch that you felt the Vampire Chronicles were complete, that there was a kind of closure to the themes that you have been working on ever since Interview with the Vampire. When I read the book, read the manuscript of it, it seemed to me not only a fitting closure, but a genuinely daring closure. Not just an adventure for Lestat, but going right into heaven and hell and confronting God and the devil themselves. And I found myself wondering how your readers were going to respond to this.
Well, I can tell you right off that the readers don't want the Chronicles to end. That I've gotten phone call after phone call on the listed number I have saying, please bring Lestat back, don't let this be the last book. And quite a few requests for stories about other vampires. And one idea that occurred to me not long ago was that possibly sometime in the future I could assemble a group of novellas, one by one, that had to do with individual vampires. I'd like very much, say, for example, to take the character of David Talbot, who was in mortal life a chronicler of the supernatural, and make him now the chronicler of the vampires, and have, say, maybe a book of 120 pages that would be a letter to him, say, from the vampire Pandora, describing how she met Marius in ancient Antioch. This type of thing. And I would love to do this. And there's a new name for it in the business, and it's been sparked by smaller format books like Bridges of Madison County and things like that. And really, it's what we're talking about is what Henry James called the beautiful and blessed novella. I mean, that's what it really is. Yeah. But now you can publish this as an entire book in this small format. And I think at some point I'd like to do that, but I don't want to take on the ongoing enormous metaphysical context to the vampires again. I don't. I think I've reached the end, definitely, of what Lestat had to say. And I reached the end of what I had to say in those books, and they form a unity that I really am very proud of and feel very comfortable with. So again, it would be stories that don't try to draw the whole tribe together, but just, almost, and it would be wonderful because I know these stories in my head. Like I see images from how the vampire Pandora and Marius met in ancient Roman times. I see that. I saw it when I was writing the Vampire Lestat, and I didn't have room to put in that whole story. And I would love to do something like that.
You mentioned especially the character of Gabrielle. And,
yes.
And you, in fact, more than once, you referred to her and said, I have yet to get to Gabrielle.
That's right. I have yet to really get close to that character and write from her point of view. And I get many, many, many requests. And when I say requests, you know how warm I feel about my readers and how close I feel to my readers.
Yeah.
I take very seriously what they say. My readers have been very, very responsive to the real text and subtext of my work. So when they say that, it begins to inspire me. I begin to think about Gabrielle.
Sure.
So it's a very healthy thing. Sure. And they have asked a lot about Gabrielle.
Well, I remember you saying about her that at that moment in which she becomes a vampire, cuts her hair, changes, dresses as a man and all, is a moment when she is truly claiming freedom.
Yes, exactly. Boy, that was a turning point in my work, because up to that point, that type of character in the novel usually died.
Yes.
And
yes.
Suddenly she didn't die.
Yes.
There had been a tragic mother in Cry to Heaven who had died, and in Feast of All Saints it was a tragic mother who was pretty much ruined by her daughter's disgrace. And an interview with a vampire, of course, Claudia had met with a terrible ending. But suddenly, instead of dying, Gabrielle was transformed and rescued from all constraints, mortal and gender and
that is
everything
a turning
else.
point. It's a turning point in that novel. It's a turning point in the whole Vampire Chronicles, for that matter. Yeah.
And it didn't occur to me that very minute, what if she doesn't die? I mean, what if he makes her a vampire? And I thought, well, it would be, of course, the logical thing for him to do. Turning points like that, I think, are terribly important for you as a novelist. If you don't take them, you are not going to go into different stages as a writer. And as we all know, there are some writers who never really pass through more than one stage. All of their work dealt with adolescence, perhaps, all of their lives. And then there are writers that go through many, many different stages, as I think Dickens did, Charles Dickens in particular. And that's what I want to be. I want to be a writer who has gone through different stages and keeps changing all the time. And that was one of those turning points where I really broke the mold. The book suddenly changed, and it wasn't any longer just about the novice out on his own, the untutored one, like Marcel in Feast of All Saints or Louis in Interview, but it was suddenly about an older person coming onto the scene. I would like to focus now on just the experiences of various people and their responses to the dark gift of immortality.
Well, it can be a bit of a cliche, but there's a sense in which you're talking about doing something that's intimate now.
Yeah, that's very right. Like Pandora saying, Vampire Pandora, we know, was made in ancient Rome by Marius, and she was his consort, and they had a 2,000-year love affair, more or less. I would like to have her say to David, you asked me how it began, here's the story, and just have that story of Pandora, how they met and so forth. And I would love that intimacy, and I would love to be able to develop an idea like that within the scope of the novella, an extended short story.
You're mentioning David Talbot and his connection, of course, to the Talamasca, this fictional psychic detective order that's appeared both in the Vampire Chronicles and the Lives of the Mayfair Witches. Yeah. And you mentioned to me once being interested in the possibility of writing a book about the origins of the Talamasca. What would attract you about them? And can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because we just went right on and talked about something else at the time.
Well, I want very much to write that novel, and I have done a great deal of research for that novel, but I haven't gotten it together yet. I know when the Talamasca came into being, which is much earlier than anybody knows, and I have a year for it. I have pivotal people. I have a person who founded it. I have all of that. I just have not had a chance to sit down and do that particular novel. I'm not sure how I want to structure it, because I really don't want to tie it in either to the Mayfair Witches stories or to the Vampire Chronicles. So I may make it completely independent, and yet use the idea that something has recently gone wrong in the Talamasca, as we saw in one of the Vampire Chronicles. There was, in the Witches, actually in Taltos and Lasher, that there was some corruption, and use that as a starting point, but not refer to the Mayfair case in particular, but have somebody want to demand to see who the elders really are. I mean, it was slowly revealed in the last two Witching Hour books that nobody in the Talamasca really knew who the elders were, and I'd like to go all the way back, and I have done incredible research into what I see as the origins, but just haven't gotten to it. It's just sitting there.
Well, research into what then? What would be the origins?
Well,
where have you looked for this?
I hate to go into it in detail, but the three characters that fascinate me the most are Cassiodorus, Boethius, and Gregory the Great.
Right.
Cassiodorus was possibly the last person in Rome who knew both Greek and Latin, and when his monastery Vivarium was destroyed at the tip of Italy,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?